These are used and fresh pairs of my DIY resoled climbing shoes. The most recent pair on the left has been in use for about 2.5 months. I could probably have used it another month, but I've noticed a couple of wear and tear problems that I hadn't thought about. I'll go over them next. In this photo of my used shoe, most of the wear on the sole is at the toe area. It's the reason why my resole mostly covered this area with 2 overlapping patches. As the shoe wore down through the months, I noticed some wear in areas I didn't expect. I felt I had extended the patch away from the toe area enough where I didn't think there would be much cause for wear and tear beyond this extent. 2.5 months later, I can now see an additional problem with wear and tear. The red arrow points just after the rearward part of the patch near the edge of the shoe. The rounded corner of the shoe used to be a squared off edge. I didn't think this area would wear down much, especially since it's the outside edge of the shoe. Seems strange to me, but now I know that it does wear down. Another strange problem I came across was some cracking rubber on the outer edge of the shoe. Only the outside shows cracking and everywhere else is fine. Also, this is not the sole, but instead the rubber trim that wraps the leather. The cracking actually ends right at the seam with the sole. My DIY resole video used the 2 patches on the left of this group of 3 patches. In that video, I glued the larger patch on the toe of the shoe first, let the glue dry, then glued the smaller patch on top of that. This has worked extremely well for me. The original sole of my shoe is mostly still intact and only the patches have taken most of the wear and tear. To remedy the wear and tear of the shoe edge mentioned previously, I'm going to instead use a pair of larger patches shown on the right for this resole. This time around, I'm patching the shoe slightly different. If you watched the first video, I had left a gap between the edge of the patch and the toe tip of the shoe. This time, the edge of the patch will be placed closer to the edge of the shoe. In doing so, the opposite side of the patch will extend further into the shoe, covering more of the outer edge that had worn down. With this change, the patch thickness covering the toe of the sole will be less, but the outer edge will now have something covering it where there was nothing before. I'm not going to do anything about the cracking rubber trim. I don't think it'll affect the shoe's performance if it gets worse, but I'll have to see how that goes over time. Off camera, I've already stripped off the worn patches from both shoes and they're ready to be resoled with new patches. I've taped across the width of the shoe to have something to align the edge of the patch with. My first video on doing this was different from what you'll see now, so I'll describe the new process as I go. I'm starting off by applying the vulcanizing glue to the sole, then spreading it into a thin layer with my finger. In the first video, I applied quite a bit of glue. The amount I now use is nowhere near that. I'll then let the glue cure for a short time until it looks less slimy but still slightly wet. I'll apply the patch so the black part of the patch is aligned edge to edge with the tip of the shoe. This leaves the beige part of the patch protruding slightly past the shoe tip, but that should be fine. Starting from the center of the patch, press down on the entire surface of the patch to squeeze out any excess glue. This should also help to create an even bond across the patch's surface area. In the first video, I used weights to apply constant pressure to the shoe while the glue dried. I've since started using a clamp, which is a lot easier to work with. One clamp can be used to push down on a single piece of wood onto both shoes. The pressure applied can be adjusted a lot more easily. I've removed the shoes from the clamp and prepping to trim the first layer of patch. The trimming is the same as in the first video. I'll first do a rough cut of the patch around the shoe's perimeter, leaving about 1/4 inch of patch still to trim. Leaving 1/4 inch of patch makes it easier to maneuver the scissors on the final trim. On the final pass, I'll trim the remaining patch flush with the edge of the sole. It's easier to get a cut flush with the sole when cutting counterclockwise around the shoe because that's the side of the scissors that the cutting edge is on. For this next step, I'm not sure if the next gluing step is affected by this, but I always sand off the label on the patch because I'm not sure if the glue can soak into the patch through the label. To be safe, I just sand off the patch with a sanding block. Gluing the second patch on follows the same process as the first patch. The only difference is the placement of this patch will be a lot further forward on the shoe. I want to put the thickest part of this second patch at the tip of the shoe because the thickest part of the first patch was placed about 1 inch in from the tip of the shoe. Staggering the placement of the patches in this way will even out the overall thickness of how both patches cover the sole. On the left is the previous version of my resole using the small and medium-sized patches. On the right is the one I just completed using the medium and large patches. Looking at my work from this angle, I kinda wished I had moved the thick part of the patches a little further apart. Something to make a note of for the next resole. This view gives you a better idea of the difference in patch sizes used for my previous and just completed resole. With the resole extending further in by almost an inch, the wear and tear problem along the side should be resolved as much as can be. I had just started using a newly resoled pair, but it's the previous version of my resole. I'm debating whether I should resole them again with the larger patches. My hesitation is that it's so tedious to remove the patch from the shoe. For me, it takes about 2 hours to remove the patch from one shoe. I'll usually do it while I'm watching something on YouTube. If you are resoling your shoes, I think the larger patches are the way to go. Leave any questions or comments you have in the comment section down below. That's all I have for now, and I'll catch you in the next video.